presentation of the night. Woo! That's what I like to hear. Everyone, our next presenter is a Nerd Nite alum, has presented once before, and I don't mean to build your expectations too high, but he delivered one of the most powerful presentations we've ever had on the stage before. One of my favorites, Jason Porath, everyone.
Thank you. Woo! All right. Hi, everybody. So my name's Jason. I'm here to talk to you about moms, which, if you looked at the whole roster of things, Bizarro Shakespeare and Weird Poop, it probably wasn't the most exciting talk. I'm here to change your mind about moms. All right, so I'm going to start with a story. This is a story that takes place in first century China. It's a story of Mother Lu. Mother Lu was a sweetly little old lady who was part of a noble family that was well integrated into the city of Haichu. Unfortunately, her son, who was a nice young man, fell foul of a corrupt magistrate who had him killed because he was a corrupt magistrate. It's what corrupt magistrates do. So sweetly Mother Lu took the family fortune and just started giving it out to young men that reminded her of her poor departed son. So if she saw a dude who was down on his luck, needed some food, needed some clothes, whatever, she would spend the money on that guy. And after a year or two of doing this, she had run the family fortune dry. And at this point, word got out. Mother Lu was on hard times. So all of the men that she'd helped out came flocking to her like, Mother Lu, you helped us out when we were at our lowest. How can we possibly repay you? And she was just like, oh, just come here and help this little old lady. I've got just one small request for you strapping young men. Won't you please help me overthrow the government? She then revealed that she had spent the remainder of the family fortune buying a massive stockpile of weaponry. They became a band of pirates. She renamed herself General Lu. They overthrew and killed the magistrate, and then ended up overthrowing the Chinese government. That was the end of the Qin dynasty. That right there is a picture that I drew of her. I am an illustrator, historian, writer, and ne'er-do-well. I do a series called Rejected Princesses. This is the sort of stuff that I do. It's all badass women of history that you've almost certainly never heard of. If you have heard of them, it's stuff that you don't know about them. I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years. These are all people that I used to work in the animation industry. They're never going to make the cut for Disney, is the idea of it. To give you an idea of other people that I do. So basically, my thesis here is that what you think about moms when you think of the word mom is kind of missituated, and it's been sort of culturally inculcated in you. It's the idea of like a good mom who like stays at home and is a very cultural thing, and is honestly like fairly recent. Like it's been sort of beaten into you, and I am going to basically machine gun fire at you a ton of stories to try and change your orientation of your brain. So I'm going to talk real fast, and I'm sorry, but you can ask questions about this later. I just talk real fast. To give you an idea, I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years. I have 2 books. The second one is called Tough Mothers. They're over there if you want to take a look at them later. Funnily enough, as an aside, the cover for the second one, which is all about moms, that's not the cover that I wanted. The cover that I wanted was a Molotov cocktail baby bottle. For whatever reason, my publisher did not think that was, mass market friendly. Which shows you that even when people are on your side, they still have an idea of like what moms are like, what'll sell and whatnot. So I acquiesced, and we have the mama bear like heraldry cover, which is cute. However, I did not acquiesce entirely, and I had a bunch of dust jackets printed up because fuck it, I wanted it to exist. So yeah. Anyways, onto the stories. History's full of stories that you don't hear, including ones of a lot of different moms. Mother Lu is far from unique in the annals of history. So if you grew up in the UK, say, you probably know the story of Boudicca. Boudicca, first century also. Northern Britain, when the Romans were invading, they came in after her husband had died, invaded, raped her daughters, so she, in return, raised an army of around 250,000 people, killed 80,000 Romans, burnt a nascent London to the ground. Literally, you can dig underneath a part of London, and there's like a couple inches thick layer of clay. That's old London, thanks to Boudicca. This is Amani Renes in, God, I don't even remember. This is way the fuck long ago. This is the era of pharaohs, Cleopatra and whatnot. So she was a part of the kingdom of Kush, which is south of Egypt, is what modern day Sudan. When people talk about black pharaohs, Nubian pharaohs, it's her. Basically word spread that in the wake of Cleopatra's death, the next Caesar was basically going to invade the kingdom of Kush. So they decided to invade Egypt and Rome first. And they were actually fairly successful, but her husband and son were killed. So she took up the charge, and she, according to the annals of Roman history, one-eyed woman, dual sword wielding, had pet lions, would feed people to them. You can see over there on the right, that's a engraving. You can see all the people she has tied up that she's feeding to her lions. Also had war elephants. It's kind of badass. This is Tamiris. According to the historian Herodotus, Cyrus the Great met his end when Cyrus tried to invade her kingdom, and she was like, "Don't come at me, bro." And he's like, "I'm coming at you." "Don't come at me, bro. I'm coming at you." So he came in, invaded, took her son hostage. Son committed suicide in Cyrus's prison, and so she then took the fight to Cyrus, had him beheaded, stuffed his head into a wine sack, and said, "Bloodthirsty as you are, I have given you your fill of blood." She is a Scythian woman. Basically, all of the Greek Amazon myths were about these nomadic tribes that are sort of Eastern Europe. The Wonder Woman is based off of these people. It's what they actually look like. If you've ever played Civilization, she's one of the playable characters in Civ 6. Funnily enough, when this came out, everybody's like, "Wait, that pose, it's very similar to what you drew, Jason." Because I'd written about her like 2, 3, 4 years prior to this coming out, and one of the Civilization game devs actually reached out to me and was like, "Yeah, we totally ganked your stuff. We love your work, please keep going." I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool." So why don't we hear about these moms? There's many reasons, but generally in the course of doing research on my work, I sort of came down to the idea of there is one cultural force that's sort of keeping a lot of this in line, and that is the good mom. The good mom being the impossible to achieve example of the Virgin Mary, who is simultaneously a mom and a virgin, which, I mean, that's an unachievable idea. But to give you an idea of the sort of people that, I'm just going to rattle off some good mom versus bad mom stuff. So, Louise of Prussia went up against Napoleon in battle, and everybody was like, "Oh, she's such a nice, chaste, virginal woman. Not effective, but like, man, we really like her." And like, Prussia was just completely rolled over by Napoleon, and she repeatedly did entreaties with him, and Napoleon's like, "No, I'm just going to take over your country. That's what's going down." Meanwhile, you have someone like Isabella of France, who staged the only successful invasion of England since William the Conqueror, I think. She basically came in, was very popular in her day for like a hot minute. She was married to this dude, Edward II, who was really not very good ruler, cheated on her repeatedly with a bunch of dudes, and then she's just like, "Fuck this shit." Went to France after he tried to basically have her in prison and kill her, and then sailed back with an army, booted him off the throne, and started ruling for a little bit, and everybody's like, "Yay!" And then was dethroned in time by her son, Edward III, who was one of the great rulers of England. But she was very popular and then not popular, good mom, bad mom, because A, she wasn't like that great a mom to her son, and B, she was very power hungry. Another good example. Alakai Beki, who is one of the daughters of Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan basically married her off to one of these tribes that he's just like, "I want like a temporary truce with you while I go around conquering so you don't really stymie my plans." This proved not popular with the tribe, and they tried killing her, and so she ran off with her stepsons and was just like, "Hey dad, they're trying to kill me." And he's like, "I will murder them." And she's like, No. You just take out the assassins, they're my people." She's like, but he's like, I want to murder them, sweetie. Like, that's what I do. I'm Genghis Khan." And she's like, No. And one of the only people that ever really stood up to Genghis Khan and lived, and ended up making the entirety of the basis for the Mongol Empire's government. Like, all of her brothers went on to copy what she was doing, and the people that she ruled, were enormously thankful to her for basically not having killed. Good mom. Bad mom would be Turkina Khatun, who is her sister-in-law. So her brother Ogadai, who is another one of Genghis Khan's kids, basically took over the empire afterwards. Tremendous alcoholic, died from alcoholism because his wife Turkina basically kept feeding him alcohol. She was just like, all right, I have to be married to you because I'm a conquered princess, but like I'm gonna keep feeding you alcohol until you die. And he did. She took over the empire and was, honest to God, I think there's a very strong case to be made that she is the most powerful woman in human history. She ruled the Mongol Empire for 5 years at the height of the Mongol Empire's, like it took over most of Asia and she was ruling it at the time, and was in what I will argue is an open lesbian relationship with a Muslim woman named Fatima, which I think is fucking rad. But yeah, she was hated because she was, again, sort of power hungry, and you start having this good mom, bad mom thing of like, oh, well, she was like taking care of the kids, but you like were like killing some of your kids, you put others on the throne. We're not really sure what to do with you, but you like power, and we're really uncomfortable with that, so why don't you go back and be a mom? Last good mom, bad mom, this is one of my favorites. So you have Ilona Zrínyi. She was part of Hungary. She held a castle while her husband, who was rebelling against the Habsburgs, was like, get the fuck out of here, and he got imprisoned. And basically everybody in the rebellion went down except for her. She held a castle for 3 years under siege with her kids there, which is pretty remarkable. And everybody's like, yay, I mean, you weren't successful and you didn't like go to war, you just held a castle for a little bit, but you did real good and you looked after your kids and you ended up like surrendering the castle to like protect your kids, but yay, you're real nice. Contrast her with Caterina Sforza, who is one of my favorite people in history. Italian woman, held a castle against Cesare Borgia, Cesare Borgia being the subject of Machiavelli's The Prince. Real piece of shit. If I had a time machine to go back and punch one person, it'd be Hitler, but the second person would be Cesare Borgia, because fuck that guy. But yeah, she, according to legend, Cesare Borgia gathered all of her kids that were outside this castle that she was holding and lined them up right outside the castle and was like, if you don't surrender this castle, I'm gonna kill your kids. And she flashed him and said, go ahead, I can make more. Which is some baller shit. The sad thing is, it's not true. It's almost certainly not true. This was a legend that was probably spread by Borgia himself or Machiavelli, because Machiavelli was also kind of a piece of shit. Because it was part of this whole good mom, bad mom, I'm going to ruin your reputation sort of thing. I mean, if anybody's reputation should have been ruined, it's Cesare Borgia. Have I mentioned this guy's a piece of shit? After he invaded the castle, and like literally she went down like fighting him with a sword in her hand. He raped her, and then the quote that nobody is contesting at this point is that he said, if only she had defended the castle as well as she had her virtue. What a piece of shit. I want to punch that guy. She also shows up in video games. She showed up in Assassin's Creed 2. I don't know why video games are doing much better than the movies at this, but anyways. Last of the bad moms, Wu Zetian, who is probably one of the most maligned moms in history, and I think it's completely unfair. The only female emperor of China. I did not say empress, I said female emperor. She was a dynasty of one. She basically came in, she was a consort who, after her husband died, systematically rearranged all the lines of succession, killed a shit ton of corrupt people. It was actually pretty good for like the common nobles, but there was so much crazy shit said about her that it's nearly impossible in modern day to untangle what is true, what is not. One of the most malicious rumors spread about her is that she had one of her kids poisoned and then blamed it on one of her rivals and then had the rival killed. Most likely, historians think the most easy explanation is that it was actually monoxide poisoning and maybe she took advantage of that, whatever. But the Confucians fucking hated her. Like, there's almost nobody who has more shit talked about them in Chinese history than Empress Wu. And again, she was phenomenally powerful, like one of the most powerful women in Chinese history. And China is a place that has a lot of powerful women in its history, and like it's hard to find anyone like more powerful than Empress Wu. Also shows up in the Civilization series. Weird, right? So getting onto the idea of rumors sort of screwing up people and like the good mom, bad mom thing. One of my favorites is Theodore of Byzantium. her story is like one of these amazing Cinderella rags to riches. She was a sex worker who had been a actress, was a single mom, and then the emperor of the Byzantine Empire, Justinian, is like, I'm all about you, I'm gonna marry you. And everybody's like, yeah, you can't do that. And he's like, I'm the emperor, I'm just gonna rewrite the rules until I can. And he did. And people hated her. That is like low-born. She's helping out all the sex workers. Like if you look at what actually she did, it's all like she bought out other contracts for every single brothel in the entire city. She went and did a whole lot of like foreign aid for like people who'd been through earthquakes. She'd done a lot of architecture. If you look in the background, if you're familiar with Constantinople. There's the Hagia Sophia, which normally has 4 minarets in modern day. Didn't at the time. She rebuilt the damn thing. It'd been severely screwed up in an earthquake, but she spent much of her time. But the historians at the time hated her. Procopius, in his secret history, said that not only was she a bad mom, but she was a bad wife. She would go around and cavort with demons. Would kick her own husband out of bed and then have multiple demons come in, have an orgy with them, wish she had more holes in her body with which to have sex with people, and that her head would come off during the night, fly around vexing people and causing earthquakes. I'm not kidding. That's Procopius. Procopius had issues. If you actually look at the illustration for this, in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see like a little thing of a demon with a detached head. That's a reference to that legend. She was actually pretty cool, but she was powerful and people didn't like her. But this continues to present day. You have this is Emmeline Pankhurst. She was a suffragette in the UK. She was basically a homegrown terrorist. She bombed shit. She went on hunger strikes. She was one of the most dangerous women in the UK at the time. And she was regularly, I don't even know how many times she was arrested, easily over 50 in the span of 2 years. And she was like a middle-aged lady. And if you go back and look at how the press talked about her, initially it was like, look at this awful woman, she is like bombing shit. There's lots of bad things you can say about Emmeline Pankhurst. There's a lot of very legitimate criticism you can make about Emmeline Pankhurst. But what they really latched onto is that she had a falling out with her daughter, and she's a bad mom, and that's what really galvanized opinion about her. And like she did really useful stuff. Like the UK, like women's got the vote early because of her, but yeah, you start getting like, oh well, she was a bad mom, so opinion turned against her. The one that really gulls me the most in all my research is this woman, Bella Abzug. Does anybody know Bella Abzug? God bless you. So for those of you who don't know, Bella Abzug, I wish I'd been alive during her heyday. Bella Abzug was a US senator. She had one term, went 6 years in the 70s. In that time, she got the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, going. She did Title IX, she did the Freedom of Information Act, and she impeached Nixon. What? She did this all with the help of folk like Shirley Chisholm and whatnot, but her nickname was Batlin Bella. She was a Jewish woman from New York. And in her due to the vagaries of election politics at the time, she had to run like 3 or 4 times, like not only in the primaries, but just had to keep going. The thing that really got people about it was that she didn't seem motherly enough. She would go to protests and whatnot, and they're like, oh, well, you're not really the image that we're looking for. We're looking for someone a little bit more maternal. And she's like, fuck y'all. And they really tried to keep her out of politics, but she was so fucking phenomenally good at what she did, and if she had really like kept to that image, she wouldn't have gotten forward. She had to go out and campaign based on like her kugel recipe as like a good Jewish mom, which is ridiculous to me, because who cares? She's really good at her job. So you start having people that are able to turn the tables on this. Throughout history, and it's really, honestly, more of a modern thing, I would argue. This is a woman in Brazil named Carolina Maria de Jesus, lived in a favela, had 3 kids by 3 different guys, was married to none of them, ended up writing this book that became a national bestseller, and people got on her for like, oh, you have 3 kids from 3 different, you're sort of unsuited to be a mom and whatever. She's like, oh no, I'm going to burn you to the ground. And she just became this force in Brazilian politics for a while. where she just refused to let anybody like talk for her. I don't know why that went out.
It's still over there.
Yeah, it's still up over there. You might have turned around. I'm sorry. Yeah, so she was this phenomenally brilliant, very savvy human being that had a lot of people should talk about, where she was telling her own story and she refused to let anybody talk for her. This is Katie Sanguina. She was a woman in the circus who was a strong woman and like lifted up horses, like lifted up her husband. Like she was like one of the strongest women of all time. She people would come up to her when she got pregnant. She was just they were like, well, I don't know, are you gonna give up? Are you still working? Like, do you want women to vote? Like, what, are you a radical woman? And she was like, I'm a new kind of woman. Like, she took control of the narrative. She would do a shit ton of interviews, and she was just like, no, this is how it is. Like, maybe I'm like the next iteration of woman. Maybe everything is changing, and like maybe everyone will be like me. And like here, she gave like mothering tips and whatnot, and sort of like took control of the narrative. Sojourner Truth, I think a lot of people know about. She went around just sort of like taking control of the narrative, didn't let anybody talk over her, was a commanding, booming voice, and she's just like, people are gonna shit talk about her, but she got up and shit talked them right back way louder, and we remember her, but we don't remember any of her critics. The most successful of all time, I would argue, is Mother Jones. Mother Jones leaned hard into, I'm a mom, fuck you. She actually aged up herself. Like, she lied about her age as being 10 years older than she actually was. She was a labor organizer. She was referred to as the most dangerous woman in America by a lawyer, I think a district attorney, who she was in court a lot. And basically she would go around and go up to labor organizers who didn't really, people out at mines and whatnot, who hadn't really been around their family, hadn't been around women a whole lot, and she'd come up and like be their cool mom, be like, hey, so you know, like I'll tell some bawdy jokes and I'll hang out with you. I'll keep going. But yeah, she would go up to them, and after she gained their trust, she'd be like, well, I'm really worried about you. You're not really taking care of yourself. And like, have you thought about like joining the union? I think that you do really well with like, you do a lot better like looking after yourself. And like, what about your family? What about your kids? Like, she leaned hard into that, and people couldn't really go up against her because she dressed like this old, like she dressed crazy old school clothing. And she, like, nobody could really go up against her because she was just like, oh, what, me? I'm a frail little old lady. And they're just like, you walked 70 miles uphill to get to this, like, random remote coal mine. And she's just like, who, me? I couldn't possibly do that. Like, hides the mud on her boots. And this is where I think it's most interesting, is like when you see people who are kind of weaponizing motherhood and using it as a cudgel, you start seeing like a completely different aspect of this. And like, given the times that we live in, this is where I want to really end things. Because we're facing a lot of ridiculous bullshit, I think we can all agree, and having all people on board is useful. And having people that are sort of kept in a pen by the good mom, bad mom bullshit is not helpful. So these are the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo in Argentina during one of their many political upheavals over the years. Oh my God, it went out over there too. I don't know what's going on. I'm doing great. I'll just have to continue remembering like what my slides are. So the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo, their kids were kidnapped under a dictatorship, and they didn't get to see them for years and years and years. And they basically just kept showing up to this one plaza and were like, we're not going to be forgotten, we're going to continue campaigning for our kids. And they did it for 20, 30 years. Nobody could really like shut them down because they're bereaved mothers. And they weaponized that, and they eventually, the dictatorship got overthrown. And even though most of them never got reunited with their kids, there was a mass movement to do DNA testing on all these people that had been kidnapped. And even if they're not reunited with their kids, many of them have been reunited with their grandkids at this point, which is kind of amazing. On the left here, we have the Mirabal sisters of the Dominican Republic. Basically, they were three mothers who went hard against the dictator Trujillo, Rafael Trujillo. They knew they were going to martyr themselves. They did end up getting killed by Trujillo, but had taken such control over their own image as just like, they were virtuous, upstanding, like attractive young moms. What didn't make it into the history is that they were also like making bombs and like being troublemakers, but like the image of them was like these innocent moms who were killed by this monster, which is also true. And after they were killed, there was a massive uprising, and Trujillo was overthrown, which is amazing. On the right here, we have Funmalaya Ransom Kuti, who was basically dubbed the Mother of Africa. She overthrew a king. All of her kids were like these massive, like she's basically the Martin Luther King Jr. of Africa. She's like was not only mother to her nation, but like just a shit ton of other activists basically followed in her wake. And her son Fela Kuti, if folk are familiar with him, was Fela Kuti, yeah, very well-known Pan-African musician. So she basically took the idea of like, I'm a teacher and I'm a mom and you can't really speak up against me, but she was also just unwilling to take anybody's shit and would literally snatch sacred items out of people's hands and use them for her own purposes, and just overthrew government after government, was a politician in her own right, and just refused to take shit from anybody. The last one I'll leave you with is Mandukai Khatun, because the Mongols are rad. She showed up 200-300 years after Genghis, at which point the Mongol Empire had completely fallen apart. She was one of these random princesses that was sort of being almost traded about. It was almost, she did not, yay, it's back. Did not expect to really have much of a life to herself. Ended up becoming, like, reuniting all of the Mongol tribes, becoming their greatest leader possibly ever. I didn't do it. She's known as Mandukai the Wise. Many people refer to her as the second coming of Genghis Khan. Her husband was physically disabled. If you can actually see the picture, he's in the background. He's strapped to a camel because he couldn't actually walk. She did stuff like go into battle pregnant with her third set of twins at age 40. And like fell off a horse, got back on it, and started chopping people's heads off. She's the sort of mom that we need in these times, because like she took something that had completely crumbled apart, where it was a bunch of tribes that were fighting against each other, and reunited them into honestly the greatest that the Mongols had ever been. And I'm really waiting for her reincarnation to show up. So, thank you very much.
Keep it going for Jason Porath, everyone. All right, we got time for a few questions. Questions, put them in the air. You might have to yell out to me because I am impaired. Oh, all right. Would you mind stepping forward? All right, back over here.
So wow, thank you for introducing us to the real Disney princesses. I'm curious, what was your mom like?
Oh God. Were you here for the previous talk?
No, this is my first Nerd Nite.
Oh, well, welcome.
Nerd Nite version.
Because I remember the last talk someone asked me about my mom and I started crying. All right. I'm from Kentucky. My mom was born in small town Kentucky. My mom is an intensely brilliant human being. I will never be as smart or as capable as her. For the first couple anniversaries she had with my stepdad, the presents that she got were a flamethrower, a power scythe, and a chainsaw. I didn't even know a power scythe was a thing. It's a scythe that has like a button that like makes the blade go. Yeah. Anyways, my mom was also a pariah in her time. She grew up in Kentucky in the 50s, and it was an era where you're just supposed to not be a smart woman. You're not supposed to have a connection to, like, she felt like something was wrong with her because she did not know any other smart, capable women. She had no connection to this lineage that really should be everybody's common birthright. And when she hit her 30s, she basically turned her back on the shitty upbringing she had, her family who didn't support her, her first husband who not only didn't support her but tried to kill her. Just all this shit. She joined the counterculture, met my dad, and got pregnant with me, which was a surprise because she didn't think she was actually supposed to be able to have kids. Funnily enough, my surname was my dad's name. Porath is Hebrew for fruitful. Weird, right? So she ended up having me and my brother, and then in time, many other stepbrothers. I have 7 brothers. My mother's the same. But I know that was a decision for her. I know she didn't plan on having kids. I know my dad certainly didn't have a plan on having kids. And I know she was coming to a point where everything in her life was sort of coming to a level of possibility that hadn't existed before. Prior to her 30s, she had been on this track where she was like a cheerleader and married the captain of the football team. And suddenly she was making her own money, she was a published author, art was taking off, she could do everything in the world. Like, my mom is an intensely capable human being. She reshingled the roof at 60 years old and wouldn't let any of me or my 7 brothers help because we wouldn't do as good a job, and she was right. I kind of wish I still knew how to reshingle a roof, but I wouldn't do as good a job as Mom. And she chose to be my mom instead of pursuing all these things that she could do. And that weighs on me. And so I made this, because I can't go back in time and give this book to my mom, but I can give it to other people who might be in her position. TLDR, my mom is rad.
Does anyone want to follow up with a question? All right. This is going to be our last question of the night.
So to follow up with that, how much of these mothers that you just talked about do we know about through the perspectives of their children? Like through
That's a good question. I mean, I now have to like go back through my mental Rolodex, like, who did I talk about? Much of them are honestly like, it's not their kids a lot, like, because there's very specific historians throughout time who sort of go and talk about them, and like, you have to understand that everything that I've talked about is like my best attempt to sort of untangle the vagaries of like bullshit misogynist history and like shitty historians. It's very rare that it's their kids that are doing it. Modern day, it's more common. So someone like Bella Abzug, a lot of the oral histories of her come from folk like Gloria Steinem, Shirley Chisholm, but also her kids. And her kids have such an interesting view on her. It's always like, it's a real treasure whenever you get like someone who's a very close person to that talking about them, because it shines a completely different light than you would have otherwise gotten. Like, one of the great oral histories of Bella Abzug, one of her kids is just like, I think if she was born in another time, she would have been a lesbian. Which is like, what? That's amazing. And it fits, but like, you never would have gotten that from anyone else. It's rare, but it's precious when it does happen.
One more time for Jason Porath, everyone! And keep it going for every presenter we had tonight, Hannah and Emily. Thank you to all of you for doing such a great job. Have a good time. Thank you, sir. We apologize for the technical difficulties. Hopefully will not happen again, ever, but you know.